Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Plumeria webinar. I'm Wendy Tracus. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Plumeria Global Education Group. If this is your first time hearing about Plumeria, we are a US-based 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to providing cross-cultural and professional development opportunities for people around the world. We have several great interactive webinars coming up as in our cross-cultural community building education series, of which this webinar is a part. When you registered for this webinar, if you chose to add the email be added to the email list, you will receive email about how to sign up for these as they come available. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for the same announcements. So real quick, I'd like to introduce our speaker, and then I'll turn things over to her. Kristina Curtis has been in the field of ESL and EFL for over 15 years as a teacher, teacher trainer, administrator, and curriculum designer. She has experience teaching in the U.S. K-12 public school system, university IEPs, and children and adults abroad. She made the shift from classroom teaching to EdTech in 2015 and currently works as VP of Customer and Learner Operations at NGen, where she focuses on learner support and engagement. Kristina holds an MA in TESOL from the University of Delaware, and we're also very proud to have her as a member of the board of directors for Plumeria. So now I'll turn it over to Kristina.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and thank you for having me. I am going to get started by sharing what I have here. And while I do that, I want to mention that I'm really excited, and I want to make this as interactive as possible. And I want to facilitate a discussion, much in the way that we want to do in our own classrooms. So while I do that, I would like to ask our participants, Helen, can you please tell us about the type of classroom that you teach in and what age group? Because I really want to try and focus on what is most helpful and relevant for you as a teacher.
Okay, thanks so much. I teach in primary, elementary classes, that is primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, up to primary 7. That is where I teach, but I added my papers and I'm yet to graduate in December of this 2024 to become a teacher trainer. So I have upgraded from teaching young children of primary to now teaching teachers, to train teachers. So I can be posted to teach in a PTC, that is the training primary teachers, or in an NTC to train secondary teachers. That is the level I am now in, but not yet employed in Uganda. I have not yet got a job. I have not yet got my papers, but I'm set to graduate in December. So in primary, we handle the age group of 6 to 13 years, and the children who do not join early, they can begin maybe from 7, 8, and those ones will finish primary level when they are 16, 15 years old. So now this other level of NTCs and PTCs, the teachers, those are adults. That is the level I teach.
That is fantastic. Thank you. It's really important to, for me to understand the age groups when we're talking about motivation and engagement, because the demographic that we're working with, each demographic, age group, background, circumstances, their motivation for learning English and how we engage them really changes a lot. So what I have for our agenda today, I want to talk about, first of all, why are motivation and engagement important? some strategies and best practices. So we'll talk about student-centered learning, engaging activities, learner autonomy. We'll have a discussion. How do we make learning relevant and goal-aligned? How to provide interesting content to the extent that we're able to, and how to make it fun. And then afterwards, we're going to have a group discussion and Q&A. Okay, so the first thing I want to ask participants here, the audience, why are motivation and engagement important? What do you think? Helen, we can get Aaron, we can get Sean. Aaron.
I think that motivation and engagement are important because you need to have that motivation and engagement to really get that information stuck in your head. The students, if they're not motivated, they won't remember it very well.
I totally agree. Helen?
Yes, thank you so much. I think it is very vital for us as teachers to motivate and engage learners so that we induce or we increase their participation during the lesson. Because like when you are introducing the lesson, you need to bring the activities that will motivate, that will make those learners to become so interested in learning what you are going to teach. And also when you engage them in the lesson, they can learn, and they will be able to remember, and they can implement what they have learned.
Exactly. I totally agree. They need to be active. They need to be part of their learning. And since you're training the teachers, you're teaching the teachers, the same for them, actually. They need to have that, that motivation and engagement as well when they're learning from you. So the motivation keeps the learners engaged, and then the engaged learners are more successful. They make more progress. And like Aaron said, it sticks. And this is part of the reason why I want to engage the audience. I want you to be engaged so that you're participants in the learning as well. Sean?
I was just thinking, what I found is that when they're motivated and engaged, they're willing to overcome shyness or hesitation or fear of making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that facilitates their learning as well.
Completely. I think that also lowers the affective filter, so they feel less stressed. Yeah. So absolutely right. I agree with you. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of establish why it's important for us to talk about this, and then we'll get into the strategies. So the first thing is making sure that all of our activities, all of our lesson planning, it's student-centered learning, keeping them engaged. So I, as a professional, have sat through webinars, maybe for like, an hour or two, where I'm just listening, and it's really hard to stay focused. It's really hard to listen and learn that way. And so having the learning being student-centered and oh, we have a visitor, on the students, that's how we keep them engaged and paying attention. Aaron, I'm not sure if your hand was up from before or if it's a new question or comment.
I'm not showing my hand up.
Oh.
Apparently it is up. Okay. I'm down now. Sorry.
Hello. No, that's okay. Hello, Amina. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello,
Nice
everyone.
to
Hi, Amina.
We're going to have a chance for discussion, and at that point, then I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and we can chat a little bit. So this is by no means an exhaustive list of how we can make our learning student-centered, but these are just some examples. So the first thing is collaborative learning. collaborative learning shifts responsibility from the teacher to the student or the students, and they work together, they work with their peers. It's like working as a team. So for example, the learners work in a group to create a survey. Then each person has a different role. I found Helen, both as a teacher and as a parent, when you're working with young kids, giving them jobs is something that's really powerful, and they feel ownership and responsibility. So they can make that survey, and then they can go out, at recess, or they can go out. If you have adult learners, they can go to the park and they can ask those survey questions and get the answers and use the language that they are intending to use and actually get that practice. But they were taking part in creating that survey, and that gives them that sense of ownership. This one, when I taught youngsters, was one of my favorite things to do, is learning centers. So this is student-centered, engaging activities. They're also self-checking and self-selecting. So for example, in a classroom, we can set up, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 centers. And they have, for example, 10 minutes per center. And so they can do a listening activity in one center while another student at the next center is doing a game with a partner. Time's up, then they switch, but it keeps them going, it keeps them busy, it's interesting, and they're doing the work. And then we have our resident project-based learning experts here. So with project-based learning, learners are actively engaging in meaningful real-world tasks. So one thing I personally love is I'm really into podcasts. And so I like the idea of like learners research a topic and record a podcast about it. And not all of these things, they overlap. One is not exclusive from the other. So I would like to hear from anyone who's joining, if you have any ideas, comments, any other examples of any of these. Helen, since you worked on project-based learning, maybe you have more you can add there. Or Erin.
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell us?
What I can add?
Yeah, please.
Hello?
Yes, sorry, go ahead,
Hello,
Helen.
Madam Kristina.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Project-based learning in Uganda has done so many, so it is really a hands-on activity that has made learners to come up with their innovations and creativity in finding solutions to the existing problems. Like the learner can use whichever they have to make something that will solve, like they are making pads, they are making their reusable pads, they are making their own readers, the books. So project-based learning is best way to go in Uganda. It was testified by one of the students from one of the schools that we train, that it has made them to become so close to their teachers, because when we are coming up with a project, when we are solving a problem, using now, maybe coming up with a project, you have to be near the teacher to ask and consult about what to use, the procedures to go about, until someone comes up with a project. So it is a hands-on method of teaching.
Absolutely, thank you.
I
And
submit.
yeah, and they have to be engaged in order to accomplish their task, right? Okay. Abba, Brenda? don't know if we can unmute Brenda. Let's see.
Brenda, please unmute yourself.
The challenge with Brenda now I know, maybe network, because in her place, they have that problem of network. Yeah, it must be a network. She wants to make a contribution, but I think now the network is disturbing her.
Okay.
If she wants to type her message, she can type it, or if she wants to send it to me on WhatsApp, I can share it.
Yes, please. Any way that you're able to communicate, that would be great, because we would love to hear from you. Okay. So some more student-centered learning. Learner autonomy is really important, and that's part of what we're talking about. So learner autonomy, meaning that they have some kind of choice and feeling of control over what they're learning. These are just some examples, okay? So give them a survey. When I used to teach adults, and they would come to the US. So in my introduction, Wendy mentioned that I taught at university IEPs. Those are intensive English programs. So we would have young adults usually, but adults of all ages, come to the US to study English intensively. And one of the things I liked to do was at the very beginning of the class or the semester, give a survey on the topics that they're interested in and what their general interests are. This can be challenging and tricky because in a lot of cases, we are handed a curriculum that we don't really have much flexibility with. But sometimes we have more flexibility, and sometimes within that curriculum, we can find ways to incorporate the topics that the learners are interested in. So give them a survey. What kind of topics do you like? What are your own personal interests? And then we can try and make them make the content relevant to their interests. And I'll get to more of that later. But you know, in any language, we like to learn, read, listen about the things that we're interested in, and that's what keeps us engaged. Self-assessment and self-reflection. I also like to, this is a little bit maybe harder for the very young students, but how do you think you did? Asking them at the end of a unit or at the end of the semester or, you know, like halfway through. What are you doing well? What would you like to work on? And the last thing, again, this can be a little bit tricky to do, but using those surveys from the beginning to try and create personalized learning paths. And one of the things that I'm doing currently is working with adult immigrants and newcomers to the US. And the most important thing for them is to be able to learn English quickly for their jobs. And so what we do is try to give them the English that they need and kind of fast track their path to success so they can get into a job and provide for their families. So any questions or comments here before I think then we might be moving on to discussion? Okay. So what I would love is anyone who can participate, if you're able to do with your network, talk about what we've discussed so far. So do you use any of these in your lesson or activity planning? What are some challenges you might have in implementing these? And which one of these would you like to try? So I want to open it up. You can unmute. We can have a discussion. Since we're not going to do breakout rooms, we can just all chat here. So I know, Erin, I know that you're teaching in a classroom now, and I'm going to call on you and ask you to kick us off.
Sure. I'm actually in a new teaching situation, a new training situation, where project-based learning and mastery-based learning are core to what's going on in the classroom. And the activation of the learner's motivation is so critical. I've been working with the entry-level students, the ones that have just come in, and they're coming in from schools where they're used to being told what to do and having to trust that the adults are giving them the information. I think even Helen spoke to that a little bit, and this transition of being able to get closer to the teacher and work with the teacher instead of being informed by the teacher. It makes it's hard for the students to get to at first, and it really makes it easier for them once they figure it out to start making strides in questioning things, right, and allowing themselves to seek out answers to questions they have instead of the questions that the teachers are giving them, which we found in project-based learning across the board. And I'm pretty sure that our teachers abroad can also speak to that.
Erin, I just have one follow-up question, which is, can you share again the age group of the learners that you have?
So the ones that I've been working with primarily are 13 to 17.
That's great. I feel like there's a lot of there are a lot of things that they're interested in that point that you can kind of harness that energy and turn that into project-based learning.
That's so true. And what you find with these learners that are coming out of very strict and structured high school environments or middle school environments is that they don't know that they're allowed to. And so they fight against it at first. And then once they've figured out that they're allowed to make their own choices and in what they want to learn and how they want to approach questioning, and that they're being encouraged to do that, they really start making great strides. But that struggle is real. It takes some of them a long time to figure out that they have permission to make their own decisions.
It's really interesting. When I wrote question number 2, I was expecting the answer to be, for most people, constraints of the curriculum. But actually, it didn't even occur to me that kind of entrenched habits would be one of the initial hurdles to get over. Sean?
I currently work with high school students, and the curriculum is online. And my students, sometimes they've been born here, their parents immigrated to the United States. Others, they are newcomers with very, very limited English. So a lot of it is, following up kind of on what Helen pointed out, a lot of it for me is building that relationship to where, because part of my role is a support person. So I even get asked questions about math, and just to be there to support my students as they transition into school or go through school. Some of them have challenges at home. And it's more than just the curriculum. It's also addressing the entire student.
Absolutely, Sean. I'm glad you said that. It's holistic. And actually, I think during COVID, I know that a lot of that, not just for the population that you work with, but for everybody, I think actually that a lot of those kind of things came to light. But with the adult learners that I work with, it's a similar situation where They're balancing real priorities of family and, you know, earning enough money, and they have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. And so trying to keep them motivated to learn English is a completely different ball game or different challenge than when working in a primary school, an elementary school, where kids are just too full of energy to kind of sit and listen. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay, is there anything else that anyone wants to add before we move? Helen?
Okay, thanks so much, Doctor. I also wanted to add something. I also wanted to add on the challenges that we teachers are facing while implementing like project-based learning. In Uganda, project-based learning was started. They started competence-based learning in secondary and is a new curriculum. So therefore, most teachers have not been equipped. They have not been given the knowledge on how to handle the competences, are mostly project-based. The teachers are there and it is challenging on assessing the students' performance. Then also sometimes it is challenging because we have so many learners in the classes and may be handled by one teacher, and all those teachers need, all those learners need the attention of one teacher. That one also is challenging them in contacting each learner that may need support. Then the other one, like in Uganda, Madam Erin came train us and we went to train some few schools. Majority of the schools have not got enough knowledge on how to carry out project-based learning. And yet this year, they are going to do examinations on our first examinations on national examinations on that curriculum, which is competence-based. And we are expecting to see the projects made by the learners. So those are a few challenges that the teachers are citing out when we move to check on them.
Absolutely. I could,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I could absolutely see how a very, very large class size could make that challenging to implement. And like you mentioned before, shifting the mentality, it's a big change, and humans, it's hard for humans to make changes in any area of life, but also professionally. Okay.
Kristina, in regards to answer to question number 1, I just wanted to point out Brenda has put in her answer
Oh, thank you.
into the chat.
Mhm.
She
Okay.
says, yes, answering number 1. Currently, I'm a teacher educator, and in my instructional practices, I much love to see teachers employ these.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think the more we move towards, I think the general trend in education is to move in this direction, which I think is really fantastic. Thank you, Brenda. Okay, so now moving on to making learning relevant and goal aligned. So they have to know, the learners have to know why they're learning and what they will use it for. And I think this is really unique in language teaching, especially because the end goal with learning English or any language is not just to speak and read the language, but you're going to use it for something. We use it for communication. It might be for just for work. It might be for daily life. It might be for survival. It might be for any number of things. And so it needs to be relevant, meaning related to their life. I remember myself as a high school student asking my biology teacher, why are we learning this? And understandably, he didn't like that question. it wasn't well received, I would say. But I think as teachers, we should be able to answer that question. Why are we learning this? Because that's going to keep them motivated and engaged. So relevant to their life, and then goal aligned. And goal aligned meaning, what are their ultimate goals for, what are they going to use this for? And something I really like to do is a needs analysis. What do they already know? What do they want to know? And what are their goals? This may be a little harder for young learners, but we can show them ways in which they might be able to use English to communicate with others. With adults, depending on where they live or what they do. So I'll again give the example of newcomers to the US. What are their goals? Do they want to just be able to use English to get on the bus and find their way around town? Do they want to get citizenship? Do they want to get a promotion at work? Do they need to find a job? And we need to find out what their goals are so we can help them get there and help them learn the English that they need in order to do that. So I'm wondering if, sorry, I want to go back one step also. When we say relevant, really these two things are one and the same. So what are their goals? And then we make sure that to the extent that we can, we teach them or work with them, facilitate all of this so that they can see how this is related to what they want and what they need. So has anyone done a needs analysis? Do you know what a needs analysis is? Any comments or questions? Sean, and then Erin.
I've done several needs analysis. For example, when I worked with refugees, they were the mothers of children in an elementary school. What I found when I did a needs analysis for them, they wanted to participate in their children's education. So a lot of it was focused on reading school supply lists, communicating with the school. But that was really what was important for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so for that demographic, you know, going through, let's say, I don't know how much this happens anymore, but it does. Going through a textbook where they're learning about like how to order at a restaurant, that's not their immediate need, right? It's
No,
still,
it wasn't.
but that's not what they want and need in that moment, and that's not going to help them. Yeah, that's a really good example. Thank you, Sean. Erin.
Well, I like to think that anytime we step into a classroom for the first time, we do a needs analysis, even if we don't realize that it's a formal needs analysis. It is an analysis of what the classroom has and what it needs. Otherwise, we're flying blind. We don't know what we're really getting into or where we're going. Of course, we have a plan going in, but that has to change. So I think every teacher at some point or another has to do some kind of needs analysis. I had experience overseas working as an English language fellow, both in Algeria and Uganda, where I was asked to do certain things. And in order to do those things, I had to understand what was going on and what existed first in order to be able to effectively get programs going that were going to work for the people there. And most specifically, Brenda and Helen were both part of that project-based learning facilitators program for the project-based learning framework that we set up. It wouldn't have worked for them if I didn't know that they didn't have that foundation in student-centered learning and group work. And I learned that through observation and through talking to people and asking what they needed. And my students, of course, were the teachers, but the teachers were going to eventually reach other teachers and eventually get to the students. So this is more of a meta-analysis, an overview of the curriculum and how to effectively change that curriculum versus, or enhance the curriculum versus teaching in the classroom. but it still, I think, applies.
Absolutely. So to your point, and that's a really good point, these are just educational best practices, not just for language learning, right? Anytime we're in a setting where we're teaching or learning, then these things are really important. Anyone else want to chime in here? Feel free at any time. Okay. So this is kind of connecting back to finding out what they're interested in. You could do that through a survey or, any number of ways, but find out what they like. Do they love sports? Do they love films? Do they love cooking? Those were the examples that came off the top of my head. I know people are interested in a lot more, like a wide breadth of things. But if you're able to do this and fit this into your curriculum, I think we as teachers find a lot more success when kids and adults are able to learn through the things that they really love. So if you can do it in the curriculum, great. And I know, having taught in a public school system in the United States, in that setting, there was little flexibility. A lot of it was prescribed, but we can provide supplemental activities or encourage them to do these things outside of class, because again, this is language and it's a skill we're developing. So watch, listen, read about the things that they're interested in. So they can be books, articles, videos, podcasts, that will help keep them engaged because they're listening, learning, reading about things that they love. So I'm going to move on to our second discussion. Again, same questions. Do you see any challenges in implementing any of these? Do you use any of these in your lesson or activity planning? And if you can't unmute and tell us, feel free, please, to type in the chat. So again, content and making learning relevant and goal aligned.
Kristina,
Yeah.
let's let Helen go first, and then
Yeah, please, Helen.
Okay, thanks so much. I've seen this providing content interesting the learners. We always use in Uganda, we can have like the storybooks that the learners can read, and that one will help them to identify some vocabularies that they can use, the new words that they can use in their day-to-day life interactions. Then also we use some articles like newspapers. We have some local newspapers here in Uganda that we can give these learners to read. By so doing that, they will be discovering some words that are new to them, and they will learn to speak using those words. Then also, in most cases, for us to teach these learners to use English, we engage them to some other activities like debates. We can engage them to tell their friends the news, to tell their friends the stories. By so doing that, they are able to speak now. They are able to gamble with the language until they make it, they become fluent in speaking English. Then the challenges that we are facing, the challenges that they are just those challenges that are in every country. I asked one time, and Madam Margot said that even when very many learners in class, so those are a few challenges that we have, and sometimes some schools are not able to avail the learners with periods. Most especially this one is in the lower primary, and these younger ones that we teach. At least secondary, now those ones, because they are in project based, they have to come up with they are guided to write their own books. So they can write their stories, they can write their letters, they can write their poems. Then they keep on changing them to read. But for lower primary, some schools are not able to avail learners with the readers, the reading materials, the books, and the rest.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Helen. It was hard a little bit when you were talking about the challenges, a little bit challenging to hear. I think that you cut in and out. But Aaron mentioned, yeah, Ugandan class sizes are much larger than the typical American classroom sizes, 80 to 100 students per class. So that presents so many challenges, not just with, like as you mentioned, implementing project-based learning, but also I would imagine having taught young children some behavior management. Helen, did you want to add more?
No.
Okay,
No.
sorry, I saw the hand went back up, so I wasn't sure. Okay, Aaron?
I was just going to comment on things that I've observed with some of the classrooms. So I have done primarily teaching abroad rather than teaching in the US. And some of the strategies that are being used that I've seen are things like Rosetta Stone, which is an application that you can use for language learning. Teachers are using that to help teach language, which is out of context for the students. And it's nice that they are trying to get them language development, but it does take away from the relevance that the students are getting. I think in many of the classes that I saw, language classes overseas tend to be higher than the number of students than language classes in the US. And I know that the teachers are challenged with that. I have heard of teachers trying to work with students in classrooms where other classes are being held, and the distractions can be really difficult, which is why I think project-based learning is one of the better ways of getting that on board. Brenda, I'm showing that you're unmuted. Did you want to talk?
Yeah, I wanted to read something on what Helen said.
Please.
Yeah, like in Uganda, basically we were seeing some of the project-based learning because I carried my research in one of the sub-county in the hub country on project-based learning. I was majorly checking on teachers' awareness about the use of project-based learning. So in the schools, most of the teachers even didn't know. But through the initiative, I told them, yeah, this is just an action research to find out if you know. Now, meaning that if teachers do not know about project-based learning, how it is implemented in school, it is a challenge in primary level. So that is one of the challenge. For me, I feel if project-based learning could be an initiative that would start at the primary level in my country, I think by the time the students are embarking on it in the secondary school, the learners right from the primary could really be acquainted, because if they really don't know what project-based learning is, that means even its application in teaching and learning is a challenge. That's what I wanted to add on what Elena said. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Aaron, there was one thing I wanted to add. Actually, we might be surprised, but in the US, my kindergarten, first and second grade was also in a classroom with 2 other classes. We came in one day to find that we all had to be in the same shared space with a lot of very loud, energetic children. and we had to separate ourselves with whatever we had, bookshelves. Yes. So it happens a lot more than we might think. So I wanted to ask, yeah, Sean.
I think also in the US, it's not necessarily in the same classroom, but it's not unusual for teachers within a day to see 150 students. My class being English to help them learn English, my classes are capped at 55. I have up to 55 students total, but I'm in contact with them and meeting them on video calls every week.
Yeah.
And in contact with them every day.
That is a very large cap, but also, yes, when you're support services, you see a very, very large number of students coming in and out. I guess I want to do a time check here. There's one, okay, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The last one I think is pretty easy, which is, well, it's not as easy as it sounds, but I think sometimes we forget having fun really helps the teachers and the students. And I mean, I really sincerely believe it doesn't matter what age they are. If they're having fun, they're going to be engaged and they're going to be interested. So when I was teaching in the classroom, I loved using games as warm-ups. Like they come in and the first thing we do, get them into the class is a 5-minute game. We do a game to review information. We gamify the learning. And I think Sean mentioned this before, but this lowers their stress. This lowers their affective filter, and they feel more comfortable, and they're enjoying themselves. And even adults, you see adults who maybe take themselves a little more seriously, but when we break down those barriers, everybody really enjoys it. So that, you know, they take cues from the teacher, and if the teacher is having fun, I think 100% I believe that you can have fun and still have a really productive learning environment. So it seems simple, but I thought it's worth mentioning because sometimes we get really caught up in things and we forget that. So I wanted to know if you have any questions. And I also wanted to know if there's anything that we've talked about today that you might, it could be like a specific activity or something that you might take away and try employing in your own lesson planning or activities. Does anyone want to add anything? I know that there's a really big emphasis on project-based learning. Yeah, Sean.
I've done a lot of collaborative learning,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm now starting to do project-based learning. So I'm really looking at developing that more
Mm-hmm.
with my students online.
Yeah, that's great.
This is really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sean. Does anyone else want to add anything? Erin?
Yeah, I'm always trying to improve my strategies and figure out where I can get better, especially not just as a teacher, but what I learn, I share with the teachers that I work with so that can be expanded. I can extend what I've learned out to other folks. And what I'm learning right now is more about setting those foundations with the students, helping them realize, and I'm basically reiterating what I said earlier, helping them realize and understand that they can be in control of what they learn, and you don't have to come up with those ideas by yourself. You come up with them with the students. And one of my favorite things that I've done, and these are with older students, but it can be done with younger students as well, you just need to change your language a little bit, is say, here's our goal. And you can take your course objective and tell the students the course objective. Say, okay, today this is our objective. How do you think we can meet that objective. And that way, they actually are taking part in what you're doing in the classroom. And maybe we had to learn measurements in one of the classes I was teaching. And what we actually did is I did take that in there and I said, okay, we have to learn how to say the different measurements, such as cup, ounce, pound, that kind of thing, kilo. And we have to use them in appropriate ways. What do you want to do? And the class decided to make a recipe book. And each student made a page with their favorite recipe, and they had to use the measurements. And so they met that criteria by doing something that they actually had ended up with as a project and a product. It took a number of weeks to actually finish it completely, but they each created their own pages. They edited each other's pages. These are teenagers, edited each other's pages, and then we put it together as an entire book, and somebody made art for the cover. And so they got that book when they were finished with all of their work in it. And that's so motivating and uplifting for students to be able to have something that they can hang on to. I know in some areas that's not always possible. Resources aren't available. And especially when you have a class of 100, you might have to break it down into like groups of 20 so that you'll end up with 5 books, for example, if you were using that particular one. But letting them take part in the planning process and asking questions, I think, is at the core of making this kind of learning work. If you're not asking questions, you're not getting the information you need from the learners, and you're not giving them the control that they need.
That's amazing. I love that you did this project-based learning, but then also gave them the ownership of deciding what it is that they wanted to do in order to meet the goal. So they're not asking like I did in high school, why are we learning this? That's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any questions or anything they want to share? Brenda, please.
Brenda, please unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yep, we can
Hello?
hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, I really love to see project-based learning being implemented, and actually I've carried myself as an ambassador. Wherever I get a teacher, I speak about, do you know about project-based learning? Can you use project-based learning in the class? So I have loved because it is really engaging, it is really changing, which are, to me, if everyone uses it, the learning everywhere in the curriculum, whether it is in the lower primary, whether it is in the kindergarten, things would absolutely change. So I really love to see that, to extend, to teach, to train, to make teachers actually use project-based learning wherever they are. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. Okay. Helen.
Okay, thanks so much for the presentation that I've got today. I would love to be at least be given this chance, this kind of a chance to be attending this kind of webinar so that I add on my knowledge, I get more knowledge. Like today, motivation. And when we talk of motivation and engaging the learners in learning English, it cuts across, even it begins from us, the teachers. You know, a teacher, you have to bring that motivation from your heart. You first of all have to like what you are doing, so that when you go to these learners, you will be so interested in teaching them to learn English. So I'm so happy for the program that I have engaged myself in this short period of time today. And I pray that we continue having more and more. And I'm ready to continue attending them, even if I am taken somewhere for such activities or conferences or what, I'm ready for it. I'm really counting myself a chanceful person in the world, because imagine now seeing Madam Kristina, Madam Erin, Madam, so many people from different countries now. Thanks so much.
Helen, thank you so much for attending. I can feel your motivation. And I think that's a very good segue to hand it back to Wendy to talk more about Plumeria and possibly more upcoming. No, we're going to do a Q&A about, are we going to do a Q&A or no? We do have more, there we go. We do have more coming up. As Wendy mentioned in the beginning, we have more webinars coming up.
Well, thank you for joining us. Yeah, like the screen says, is there, I did show, we do have some webinars coming up, but if there are topics or specific subjects that you would like to see us cover, please feel free to let us know. You can put it in the chat. You can send us an email or contact us on social media and let us know what you want to see, what you want to learn. If there's questions now, I know Kristina needs to go, and I really appreciate, this has been really great. Kristina, thank you so much. But Aaron and Sean are both also experienced, and they can answer questions if you have stuff right now with regards to the information that Kristina went over today. Does anybody have anything more they would like to ask, or shall we continue on? And maybe if you have suggestions for future webinars, we can talk about that too. Helen, Brenda, do you have anything that you might be interested in talking about now with regards to this, or do you have any ideas for things you'd like to see us cover in the future? Oh, and Kristina put her email in the chat. So if you have any questions directly for her, you can send her an email. Thank you, Kristina. Brenda says, I really get changed as an educator for being a participant in a webinar like this. Thank you so much. So here, I am the Chief Operating Officer of Plumeria, and I am not an educator. I'm an historian, but I am happy to answer any questions about Plumeria and help you out in that regard. So you can send me an email there. And our email, or our website is plumeriaeducationgroup.org. This webinar is sponsored by Third Spaces, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I really appreciate them giving us the technology support that we need to do these webinars. So thank you very much. I hope to see you again soon. We have a webinar coming up at the end of October, so keep an eye out for that.